Hello, everybody in Big Talk Country. I wanted to reach out and do a little bit of a short today. We had some issues and some things arise at showtime, so therefore we couldn't go at showtime. And by the time the things were remedied and taken care of, Dalton couldn't make it. So I'm going to come through. I'm your host today, Sam Sprunger. Welcome to Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. I am, like I mentioned, I am Sam Sprunger. I'm just going to go over what's going on in the college football world at, excuse me, the Big Ten level. And then maybe talk about a couple of national games that might jump out and grab my interest to chat about just for a few minutes. It's not going to be a very long. This is a short. We're going to do a short here to where you're just going to get me talking about some of the games and the importance in the Big Ten themselves. So we jump in right at it. Northwestern travels to College Park to take on Maryland Terrapins. Maryland coming off a pretty rough game against IU where they were in it and then kind of caused some turnover or committed some turnovers and therefore kind of fell out of the game. And the Hoosiers, don't get me wrong, the Hoosiers did plenty of that to Maryland to make them kind of make those mistakes, and they were forced into those mistakes. But Northwestern travels out to College Park. I don't know that it's going to be a huge difficult game for them, but I've also thought Michigan would run away with it against Minnesota, and it took a botched offsides call on the onside kick to solidify that game for Michigan 2 weeks ago. And just a real quick mention of that is you got to remember from week one, there's no guarantee that Minnesota would have driven down even if they'd gotten into field goal range, would have hit it. If you remember, their kicker is the one that missed the field goal at the end of the game in the first game against North Carolina, where he missed. It was very close, but he missed, and the fireworks went off because they thought it was good. But that I'm not damning that kicker, but I'm just saying there was no guarantee that Minnesota was going to get back in it, but they didn't even get the opportunity. Anyways, let's jump back to the docket for this week in the Big Ten. Washington travels to Iowa City to take on the Hawkeyes at Kinnick Stadium. That's a 12 o'clock kickoff on Fox, and this is going to be an unusual, a good game to watch for me to watch. Iowa currently a 3-point favorite, which means they're about a wash. They're at the same. You get 3 points for being at home. So Iowa's -3. The weird thing about this game is Washington's coming off a big upset of number 10 Michigan or number 9 Michigan last week, maybe 11. I don't remember exactly where they were at, 9, 10, or 11. But a big upset of them in Seattle. And then they get to travel, halfway across the country to play Iowa. Iowa can win games by throwing well under 100 yards. They do little on offense, but their defense is prime and key and just really, really a good program or side of the football. It makes the team run. So therefore, this is going to be an interesting game to see if Iowa can even produce enough to get enough points to beat Washington. Washington is an unusual team this year because we weren't expecting a lot from them, but they're sitting pretty good. I mean, they beat Michigan last week, like I mentioned. They're 4-2. They're sitting 5th in the Big Ten right now, but that's basically behind the log jam of undefeateds. We say 5th because IU is at 3-0. They're a half game in front of everybody. But Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State all undefeated in conference play and overall, which right there's your 2, 3, and 4 ranked teams in the country. And Washington falls right in behind them, along with Nebraska and Michigan at 2-1. So Washington, to me, they're at or a little bit under what I assumed they were going to win this year. They're 4-2. They've kind of surprised me in the aspect of I thought they were only going to get 5 or 6 wins anyways. So I think they've overachieved, and for good for them. It also makes the Big Ten more viable when you've got more teams that are overperforming from what they were expected to do. IU, it's good for the conference because you've got IU sitting really well in the they're in a bye week this week, but really well right now to potentially, and I hate saying this as a Purdue fan, but as a Big Ten fan, it's good for the conference to have some of these surprises, these great stories, and IU is one of those. Kirk Cignetti, like him or love him or not, he is producing. He's cashing the checks that he already wrote with Media Day and his conference saying, Google me, or at Big Ten Media Days saying, two of my teams have been predicted as being next to last in the conference. And one time we won the conference championship, and the other time we played in the conference championship game. So he's cashing the checks, folks. He is absolutely cashing the checks that he wrote prior. Excuse me. But it's going to be interesting to see where IU goes. They're off this week, so we don't have a game necessarily to talk about that. Rutgers hosts Wisconsin, coming off their first loss of the year. Greg Schiano trying to get back into it right now to where Rutgers can be looked at as a viable, not maybe playoff team, but a viable team to sit in the top half of that conference. This is a loaded conference. Like it or love it, or like it or not. Love it or leave it was what I was gonna say. Love it or leave it. They've got teams that are overachieving, and those teams that were expected to do well, doing well. So it actually makes for a better overall conference. So these teams, IU, Rutgers, granted, they haven't won a big game, haven't beaten a big name opponent yet. But they're 4-1. So they're sitting at 4-1, waiting to take on the Badgers, who have just beat up on Purdue, but pretty much everybody's going to beat up on Purdue this year. They're not good. Illinois draws that straw this week. They get to play Purdue. They get to host Purdue. So Purdue goes back-to-back weeks on the road, and with the way the Illini defense is playing, I don't see Purdue doing much against them, but yet I think their Illinois offense could produce some good points. So I would look for, right now, Illinois is a 22.5-point favorite. I say that's about right. I would not be shocked if it was 4 touchdowns, Illinois winning. But let's move on. Minnesota travels to UCLA. LA's a big happening town tomorrow. This game is at 9 p.m. Eastern on the Big Ten Network. And it's a couple of teams. Minnesota's 3.5-point favorite, so they're comfortably a favorite against UCLA. That's not to say that UCLA can't do something, but I agree with UCLA's. They're rebuilding. I saw power rankings. I forget from where of the Big Ten Conference, and they had UCLA right above Purdue, and Purdue's 18th. So UCLA's gonna take some lumps, and this is a winnable game for UCLA, but the way Minnesota has been playing, the game against Michigan just a couple of weeks ago for the Little Brown Jug, I talked about that. They're coming off those 2 losses, and prior to that they lost to Iowa, and they lost to Iowa by 17 points, and that's why I just assumed Michigan was playing well, that Michigan was going to run away with that. They didn't, and they got the assist from a botched call that I just talked about a little bit ago. But then last week they hosted USC, so they're taking care of both of the LA schools back-to-back weeks. Hosting USC, upset the Trojans 24-17. So they're traveling out to LA to go take on the Bruins. I would foresee them as that they're going to get that win. I and just about the time I say that, they're gonna do something to screw that up. But the way they're playing now is one of those times that I think they get that win probably pretty comfortably. Touchdown, 10 points. I think a couple of possessions. I think the Gophers are playing well enough right now to go out to LA and take care of business. But the big one out in LA is a 3:30 p.m. Eastern start on CBS and Paramount Plus. The number 4 Penn State Nittany Lions go out to LA to play the Trojans at the Coliseum. Right now, Penn State is a minus 3.5 point favorite. Rightfully so. I think it's relatively close. USC's not ranked right now. They lost their ranking after getting beat by Minnesota last week. They dropped completely out of the polls, but they're good offensively, and Penn State's got a great defense. But is the USC defense right now playing well enough to slow down the Penn State offense? Is this another 24-17 game and one possession to where maybe USC's got a chance, or maybe it requires a score late for Penn State? Some sort of a combination of things there. I don't see it being a hugely high scoring game, and they've got it at the over under at 50.5 points. So, and these are odds by ESPN Bet. They have the over under at, like I said, 50.5. That kind of lends to what I was saying. Maybe a 27-24 game, somewhere in that range. But I think Penn State goes out there and wins. I think Minnesota goes out there and wins. But the big one tomorrow, 7:30 Eastern on NBC and Peacock, from Autzen Stadium in Eugene, Oregon. The Ohio State Buckeyes, ranked number 2, go in to Eugene to take on the Oregon Ducks, ranked number 3. The line right now is Ohio State -3. That's a game that may be worth watching if you're at home or have nothing else to do. Watch that game at 7:30 to watch the Buckeyes take on the Ducks. I think Ohio State's got a lot going on right now. And Oregon, and probably part of this plays into the fact that Ohio State's a 3-point favorite, is Oregon showed some propensity to struggle with teams. And granted, they struggled to beat Boise State, and Boise State more than likely is going to be a playoff team. So that's not necessarily one that you go, oh well, not any good. That's not a good loss or a good win there. You struggle with Boise State, but they struggle a little bit, or they only beat Idaho by 10, 24-14 in the first week. They blew out Oregon State for the not the Apple Cup, the Civil War or whatever it's called now, 49-14. They held serve against UCLA and Michigan State. They beat by 3 touchdowns. So it might be that they have figured it out. They maybe have figured it out. And the first week was their quarterback Gabriel getting used to the system in gameplay. So maybe that's what led to that struggle. Boise State's good. To me, that's not a surprise that it was a 3-point game and that they struggled a little bit with a really good team. They still came out and won. Overall, the wins are what matters. And then the next 3, the closest game is 21 points. So I think they've done a lot to say that they've cured what maybe ailed them at the beginning. But right now they sit as a 3-point underdog at home, which means if they were playing this at the Horseshoe in Columbus, they'd say it was a 6-point favorite for Ohio State. That's the docket for the Big Ten this week. There are maybe a couple of games that I would say keep an eye out. Clemson and Wake Forest. Wake Forest they beat NC State last week in a fashion that they required them to drive it late at the game. In the game, NC State struggling this year compared to what they had. But Wake Forest put together some drives and got the win. Clemson playing very well after getting beat pretty badly by Georgia week 1. They have clawed their way back up and got to the top 10, playing some pretty good football. So that is something that a game you might want to look at. In the SEC, the Red River rivalry takes place this week with number 1 Texas and number 18 Oklahoma. It's at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas, and many times this game doesn't matter how you're ranked. It's very nip and tuck. There can be some upsets, so don't be too set on Texas running away with this. This could be a pretty darn good game, and you never know when the Sooners are going to pull that out. Notre Dame hosts Stanford. Stanford's down this year, so that's one that's not necessarily. But of course, Notre Dame got beat by Northern Illinois at home, which is where this game is at. Undefeated Pittsburgh hosts Cal. And why is this a big deal? Cal played number, I believe, 6 Miami pretty well last week. Should have beat them. They just kind of melted down and didn't end up taking home the W against the Hurricanes. And now they travel to Pittsburgh. So they got to go across the country, but they take on the undefeated Panthers. This is a kind of a test because Cal is a pretty decent team, so them taking on an undefeated Pitt, you could see maybe a trap game to where Pitt doesn't realize it, takes them lightly, whatever. Cal's been down in the past, but they have a really good offense that produces a lot of points, so keep an eye out on that one as well. Number 5, Georgia takes on Mississippi State. That is a game that probably Georgia takes care of, but the last one that I really wanted to really look at, actually there are 2, I apologize. Tennessee, Florida. While Florida is struggling this year, it's always a rivalry game against Tennessee. You always see the Gators kind of at least put together a decent portion of the game. So if they can keep it close throughout the first half, maybe they stick around and upset the Volunteers for the Vols' second straight loss if they can pull it off. Last week losing to Arkansas, but Florida, Tennessee, always a good game. The 2 different colored oranges, so keep an eye on that. But that is an interesting game. The last one is Ole Miss, number 9 Ole Miss against 13 LSU. Somebody's getting a second loss. LSU right now, 4-1. Second in the SEC. You look at, if it'd come up. Okay, sorry about that. But you look at, now I lost it again. Sorry, everybody. This is frustrating. There it is. Ole Miss. They bounced back last week against South Carolina. They did a very good job after getting beat by Kentucky and really taking on some criticism about how could they let Kentucky beat them? Did they overestimate them? Did they overlook them? Did they do this? Did they? Sometimes teams lay eggs. Georgia, the past 3 times they played in Lexington, struggled to win against Kentucky. They beat them all those times, but struggled. Could have lost any of those 3. But the Rebels lose in Lexington, or not even in Lexington, at Ole Miss. And then they travel to South Carolina, to Columbia, to take on the Gamecocks, and they just thumped South Carolina 27-3. So did they recover well enough to get back into that? It's a pretty ugly rest of schedule for Ole Miss, so they really can't afford to drop too many on their mistakes. They can't perform poorly and afford to drop one if they want to try to play for the SEC tournament and championship and try to get one of those top 4 seeds. They can't lose another one. But they've got LSU this week, Oklahoma next, Arkansas, who's fresh off of that upset over Tennessee, coming back after that. Then the next week they host number 5 Georgia. So Ole Miss, Georgia on November 9th. Then they travel to Florida. We don't know what the Gators are going to look like at that point. Maybe they've turned things around and started doing some stuff. But then they wrap up against Mississippi State. That game's always a big rivalry. It's a big rivalry game, and that you see some upsets happening in those. So just a quick recap. Northwestern takes on Maryland tonight. Washington travels to Iowa tomorrow, 12 p.m. Eastern. Wisconsin travels to Rutgers at 12. Then the 3:30 slots. Number 4 Penn State travels out to USC to take on the Trojans. Purdue goes to Champaign to take on the Illini. Look for the Illini to win big on that one. Then the standalone 7:30 game. Number 2 Ohio State. Number 3 Oregon. That's going to be a great matchup. I really am looking forward to that game. Minnesota then travels to LA to take on the Bruins. That's at 9 p.m. Eastern. So a decent docket for the Big Ten, a really good overall docket for the whole college football schedule. If you're traveling, find it on the radio, listen to something. If you've got the capability to sit in front of your television and watch, do it. If you've got the capability like I do with satellite TV, able to put 4 games on at once, that's like in heaven. Do that. If you've got the capability and you really are looking for something to do, slap some stuff on the grill, get that grilled up, have a nice, put it on the radio, satellite radio, if you've got it, something to where you can hear all of the great football. I like listening to the Learfield. Personally, the Learfield, it's like the Red Zone channel on Sirius XM. It takes you to all around the country to games. I like listening to that while I'm doing some grilling or something, especially on a loaded weekend like it is to this weekend. Have fun watching this. Apologies about the extreme delay on getting anything out, and also apologies for not being able to get a full show with Dalton and getting his thoughts on things, because now it's like I'm telling you how things are going to happen. Don't listen to it. Take it for what it is. If you disagree, perfectly fine. Why don't you reach out? Let us know. And there are ways to get a hold of us. Go to the TikToks, the Instagrams, and the platform formerly known as Twitter at B1G_talk. That's B1G, not B-I-G, B1G _talk at Big Talk. Facebook, you just do a search for B1G Talk, Big Talk. Don't go to all Big Talk. I say this every week. I think they're probably great people, but they're not us people. So go just to Big Talk on Facebook. Every week we will be, except for poorly planned weeks, we will be on the ASAP network at 9 p.m. Eastern. 9 p.m. 9 p.m. Eastern. 9 a.m. Eastern. I was talking about Minnesota and UCLA at 9 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. Every Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern. You can find us on the ASAP network and the Lounge Media Group page. Then also later that day, the podcast version of the show will be out wherever you find your podcasts through Lounge Media Group. And if you want to watch the stream, you can just go straight to Spotify, and our video is there. So thank you so much for understanding. Maybe being a little frustrated, but understanding that some things popped up, and at least we got you got you my preview of the Big Ten docket this week, and a few others on the national level too. It's going to be a fun weekend watching college football. I've got some stuff to do, but I'm going to have the radio on, and I'll be listening to all that stuff while I'm toddling along and doing my things. But I definitely am ready for the Big Ten and the national schedule this week. It's going to be a really fun week. So thank you so much. That's the latest from Big Talk College Sports with a Midwest perspective. Blue collar, blue blood. I am Sam Sprunger. Dalton Shetler couldn't make it today, but he is also a very big part of this show. So make sure you follow him on social media anywhere. Just look up Dalton Shetler. You'll find him. You will, I promise. But a fantastic guy to be in this voyage with on Big Talk, and really happy to know him as a person and as a friend. So enough talking Dalton up. He won't know I talked him up. He won't. Somebody should tell him. But thanks again, everybody. Sorry for the delay, but you know what? Have a great weekend. See ya.